All right. We've got it. We've made it to 100. All right, everyone. I hope you guys had a great weekend. And welcome back. Welcome to your last full week of classes here. And welcome as well. Let me make sure I'm recording. Yes, welcome as well to Classics 160B1, Meet the Ancients. I, of course, am your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we get to see the collapse of the Roman Empire, right? We are going to talk a little bit about what happens, right? The actual history behind the downfall of Rome. And then just like we looked at last week, we're going to think of some of the explanatory factors for why this happens, right? And one of the kind of things I want you to think about in the back of your mind is essentially like, is this inevitable, right? Is it always inevitable that after, some reasonable amount of time, a few hundred years, maybe 1,000 years, something like that, is it inevitable that large-scale political structures like the Roman Empire eventually will collapse? So that's going to be kind of our goal for today. And then what we'll do on Wednesday is think about kind of when the Roman Empire actually ends, right? I'm kind of talking about the downfall today. On Wednesday, we're going to be like, well, when does it actually end? And we're going to see that that's a slightly more complicated problem or question than it might seem like on the surface. So let's go ahead. We're going to turn down the lights, bring down the projector, fire this thing up for lecture 15.1, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. So we're going to start with announcements as usual. We're going to recap, and I want to hear it from you guys, right? What are some of the reasons that we talked about last week that made the Roman Empire successful, right? What are some of the factors that made it a success for at least 200 years? And then we'll cover the history of the decline, right? What actually happens? What are some of the developments? And then we're going to talk about some of the structural reasons for things falling apart, right? The digitizing Delphi thing, I think I'm going to save that for Wednesday this week. So if you're doing the honors thing, stick around a little after on Wednesday, and we'll touch base there. But for today, we'll just go through our lecture with the kind of recap of success, and then the history of the decline, and then explaining why that actually occurs. So let's go ahead and dive into announcements. We got some exciting ones today. You guys know the basics, right? Put this thing in speaker view if it's not already so. The two big ones you want on your radar, your final project is due on Friday, and your exam for the class is going to be during class time next Wednesday, okay? And then after that, right, you are done with the class, right? If you don't have any makeup work, anything like that, you are done with the class, and you can go ahead and focus on your other final exams. So, Hunter, that's a great question. The exam is not going to be cumulative, right? You can think about this as almost like a second midterm, right? An end of semester midterm, rather than really a true final exam that covers everything. And the format of that is going to be the exact same as the midterm exam, okay? Same number of questions, same number of multiple choice questions, one essay question, and same length. And so think back to your experience on the midterm, right? If you finished the multiple choice in 10 minutes and then wrote a giant killer essay, awesome. Do the same thing, study in the same kind of way, right? If you took 35 minutes on the multiple choice and you were really did not get very much done on the essay, use that to your advantage this time to know that you have to move a little bit quicker. All right, so some good questions in the chat here in terms of essay questions ahead of time, study guide. Yes, I will have all of those for you on Wednesday, okay? So there will be some list of essay questions, something between, I'll put 5 or 10 together as a list. I'm going to choose one of those, all right? How about 5 this time? It was really hard thinking of 10 essay questions. So this time I will put together a list of 5 potential essays, okay? And I'm going to give those to you on Wednesday. You'll have a week to prepare those. Really, what I would do if I were you is not necessarily write them all out ahead of time, but at least outline all 5 of them so you kind of sort of have an idea of what to write about when you get there. And if you for whatever reason, if you get to this weekend and you like don't really have anything else to do and you're like, my project's done, and you want to go ahead and actually write all 5 essays, go for it, right? Like nobody's stopping you. And that's not cheating. That's just making me really happy that you're very well prepared for the exam. Okay. And I'll put the study guide together as well. Again, the study guide's a little bit less helpful in the sense that like it's just a lot of terms to go through. But again, if you prepare and you do well on that, you're going to be in great shape. And then in terms of kind of our schedule from here on out, right? Today, the decline and fall of Rome. Wednesday, when does Rome actually end? And then Friday is our final project showcase, right? So we'll be showing some of the student projects. And then next week, Monday, is a review. It's going to be totally a Q&A kind of review. I'll go through the major topics that we've talked about. And then Wednesday is the exam itself. And then finally, this wild journey we've been on will come to an end. But you can always, if you subscribe to the YouTube thing and you ever like get bored over the summer and you're like, man, I really just want to go listen to lectures about Hellenistic Greece again or the Roman Republic. You can access these whenever you want. You can go back and listen to the lectures and show your friends and family. Not sure anybody will do that, but they are around if you want it. Okay, so that is our plan over the next week and a half, and then we are done. So let's go ahead and recap Imperial success. We went through 10 different reasons last week for why the Roman Empire was successful. Can somebody throw me a reason or two in the chat? What? Yeah, absolutely, Hunter, right? Strong Roman army. I think that's even number 1 here. You got it, right? The Roman army, it is really, really good. And remember, their kind of new development based on our building off of the Greek phalanx was instead of having one long line, right, with super heavy armor and giant shields and a single spear, right? Now they're much more flexible than they used to be. Small external enemies, you got it, right? Ava, that's exactly right. Trickle-down assimilation, what does that mean? Can somebody explain to me what trickle-down assimilation is? That's exactly right, Ava. You got it. Yeah. Yeah, Hunter, you're right there as well, right? The idea is instead of trying to force every single person, right, to act like a good Roman, they're putting their emphasis on a few strategic leaders in a given area. And this makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, if and when you guys all become your own leaders of your own kind of empires, right, you're going to have to deal with this question of how you rule, right? How do you get people to fall in line in your empire? One option is forcing them to do it, right? Physically forcing them through things like the military or a police service to obey and behave the way you want them to. If you try that strategy, if military enforcement is your strategy for trying to rule your empire, it is not going to last very long, right? You need people to want to buy in. And that's one of the reasons. Oh, thanks, Jorge. That's one of the reasons why this kind of strategy ends up working pretty well, right? Because you're not physically trying to force people. You're trying to get them culturally to do what you want. So, somebody else mentioned the bureaucracy. It is crazy small in terms of like the yeah. So military enforcement would kind of be like a police state, and you get that in different different cultures throughout the world. That can be a very strong mechanism for enforcement, but it tends not to be very successful for a long period of time. The bureaucracy is incredibly light. I mean, again, we got like 40 or 50 people running an empire that stretches the entire Mediterranean. That is bonkers small. Trickle-down assimilation, we talked about that. One of the other things, right? This idea of accepting foreign influence. This, at least to me, when I was thinking about this, at the onset, this is like kind of counterintuitive, right? You would think that to build a strong Roman Empire, you make everybody Roman. But this also kind of goes around with the idea that like not physically forcing people to do things is actually a very good way to like engender goodwill, to build buy-in to what you're trying to do. What else did we talk about? Taxes, oh man, taxes, right? We just had tax day a little while ago. Taxes were pretty low in the Roman Empire, 5-10%, something like that. This is, extremely light taxation. And yet, because of the scale of the Roman Empire, I don't think we ever talked about this, but, modern historians estimate that kind of around its peak, the Roman Empire as a whole, right, including Italy and, France and Spain and Turkey and Greece and North Africa and Britain and all those places, we're talking something along the lines of like 60 to 100 million people, okay? So it's relatively large in scale, and what that means is like relatively low taxes, still build up a lot of total absolute wealth, and then the thing is, because you have a light bureaucracy, like it doesn't cost you that much to run things. You can guess what is the major expenditure? What do you guys think? What's the major expenditure in the state? Yeah, Hunter, that's exactly right. It's the Roman army, and we're going to see in the second half of today when we start talking about why things fall apart. The army just gets more and more expensive, and then they start kind of not having Romans be in the army so much and just kind of paying for local like mercenaries, right? Kind of subcontracting out the army. And you guys can kind of think about why that ends up being very problematic. Think about what a mercenary is going to do when the battle turns the wrong way, right? They are not super committed to like the Roman cause. Tax evasion. That's actually something that we're going to talk about in the second half of today as well. That like once Rome starts to fragment politically, the rich people on the outskirts of the empire are like, why are we paying any taxes at all to Rome? What if people just paid taxes to us instead? So we'll see that. Okay, currency, right? Again, this is about market integration. And this allows you to do those kind of things where you're like drinking French wine and eating pasta made out of like Egyptian grain and having olive oil from Spain, all while you're like in your villa in Tuscany. Pretty wild stuff at such an early stage to have such kind of market integration. And one of the things I want you to think about here is when we go through these explanations, I want you to think about, in your mind, what do you see what kind of drives historical change, right? We thought about this a little bit earlier for one of the reading responses, but is it these kind of things that are like larger economic and demographic forces, or is it like individual emperors making decisions, or is it some combination of both? Then we looked at infrastructure, right? These beautiful Roman roads, things like aqueducts bringing fresh water into Rome, and then the Imperial Rule, right? This is what we closed with last time, that a huge part of Roman success is that everybody kind of gets together, and there's no real like official decision on this, but everybody just basically agrees that having a single person rule is better than like having an actual republic where you get to vote, but one that results in like bloody warfare between these generals. Okay, so those are some of the reasons for the success of the Roman Empire, right? And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk through some of the historical development, all right? So this was written, right? The name of the lecture today comes from a famous book, more than one book. It ends up being like 7 or 8 volumes in total. This guy, Edward Gibbon, this like very attractive looking chap over here, he was writing in the late 18th century, and he writes something called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and it's something like 3,000 pages long, all right? And so this thing, just if you're ever upset and you're like, damn it, Dr. Rob, quit assigning all this homework, be happy I did not assign you this to read. It is a bear to get through. But he talks about the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. That's where we get our lecture for today. And we'll kind of use some of his ideas as a jumping off point. Okay, so let's... did I read all of it? Vanessa, you really put me on the spot there. I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you guys. Absolutely not. I have read some of it, but I have not read all of it. It is a slog to get through. Okay, so to kind of put ourselves together in terms of context here, remember that the empire itself, in terms of having an emperor be the ruler, that begins around 30 BCE, right? When Octavian defeats Antony at the Battle of Actium. He's very shortly going to become like the sole ruler in the Roman world. Now, prior to that, for a couple hundred years prior to that, Rome had been expanding, and they'd already kind of become an empire in terms of like geography and in terms of economy. But in terms of politics, they really become an empire when Octavian wins that battle. And we talked a lot about how awesome Augustus is. I love Augustus. He's like my main, he's my go-to emperor. But we also saw that immediately afterwards, emperors become batshit crazy, right? We got Tiberius, who's just like, after 10 years of ruling, he's like, I'm done. I don't need to be in Rome anymore. He just leaves the city for the next 13 years of his reign. We've got Caligula, making his horse the consul. We've got Claudius, who is like, I don't even want to be the emperor. I just want to be a historian. And then we've got Nero, right, famously like fiddling or playing his lyre and singing while Rome burns to the ground, and then building a giant palace for himself in like the prime real estate that got burnt to the ground. And what we see here, right, the big takeaway with these guys, this is the first part of the 1st century CE. The big takeaway is that, hey, if you've got a good structure, right, a good governmental structure, and you're not using Roman armies to fight other Romans, you can be as weird as you want. And things kind of start like still okay, right? So that's our kind of takeaway from these Julio-Claudians here. And what we get to after that is we've got what we call, I don't know, sometimes they call them the 5 good emperors, but basically we've got about 130 years of emperors who are like pretty successful, okay? And what we did, right, we looked at those emperors, not really their individual names or whatever, but we looked at that time period through the architecture that's built, right? So during the Flavians, we get the Colosseum, the Emperor Hadrian builds the Pantheon, we've got Marcus Aurelius writing his philosophical treatise, we've got Trajan expanding the empire larger than it's ever been before, and we've got Trajan's column here. So you don't really need to remember every one of the names down here, but just remember that, like, during the 2nd century, right, the 100s, like things are going really well as well, right? So from about 0 to about 200, right, that's what we call the Pax Romana, and things are really, they're humming along. Now, one of the weird things is that if you picked anybody, if you picked any emperor, right? Oh, okay, let me step back for 1 second. So one of the weird things is that all these dudes, right, the Flavians and Nerva and Trajan and Hadrian and Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius, they're not like father-son related, right? So what ends up happening is that, like Julius Caesar named Augustus as his heir, these guys are like picking somebody, maybe a nephew, maybe a cousin, right? Somebody close-ish related, who they think is going to do a really good job ruling, and they groom them to rule. And so even though it's an empire and rule is passed down from one person to the next, it's not necessarily a familial like passage of rulership, right? It's a little bit more based on who they think would be very good for the job. Now, that changes with Marcus Aurelius, this dude here. And if you picked any single emperor, right, to like actually have his true-born son become the next emperor, you couldn't, like, I would probably pick Marcus Aurelius. I'm like, this dude is like a philosopher, right? He like fights when he needs to. He like puts on games for the people because he knows that's important to them, but he is learned and he thinks of, higher philosophical thoughts. And it's with Marcus Aurelius that we finally get a true-born son following one of these emperors. And I don't know if you guys know who that is. Any spoilers as to who his son is? you watched the movie Gladiator, you guys might know. There's Marcus Aurelius. And it's this guy. His son is Commodus, who is a complete disaster. All right? Like, if you had to pick any emperor to have a true-born son, succeed him on the throne, you would pick Marcus Aurelius. And it turns out, it is... yeah, it is Joaquin Phoenix. And it is a disaster. He's a disaster of an emperor, right? So he's the first true-born son in over a century to succeed his father to the throne. He turns out very much not to be a philosopher. And instead, he's kind of a crazy person. So one, he loves the games, right? And he fights in the arena more than 100 times. One of the interesting things is that every time he fights in the arena, I mean, obviously, he's going to win every time. He never kills his opponent, right? So as a gladiator, he never kills his opponent. He always spares their life. But when he's training, like when he's training as a gladiator, like in his court or whatever, he's like killing people all the time there. His like training partners are always dying. So he fights as the gladiator a bunch. He charges the city of Rome. So every time he fights as a gladiator, he charges the city of Rome 1,000,000 sesterces, which is a denomination of coinage. So he charges the city to pay him in order to fight as a gladiator. And they almost go bankrupt because he fights so often. He thinks of himself as Hercules. He kind of pictures himself as the like true reborn version of the mythological person Hercules, or Heracles in Greek, right? The guy we've been seeing so often for our attendance. He renames the city of Rome. He decides Rome is not a good name for the city, and he's going to call it the Colonia Commodiana, basically the colony of Commodus. So he just names the city after himself. And so he rules for a while, too. He rules for like 13 years. And it's just not a very good time, right? He's like bankrupting the city. He's spending more time fighting in the arena as a gladiator than he is actually like administrating the empire. He's clearly got like delusions of grandeur, thinking that he is Hercules. Although this, I do have to say, exactly, Jason. Yeah, I do have to say that this is one of the coolest Roman statues of an emperor. So it is awesome. And you can look at it from a different perspective, right? He's wearing the headdress of the Nemean lion skin, right? And he's got the club of Hercules. So he's portraying himself as Hercules. And this is in the Capitoline Museums. So right inside the museums where that bronze statue of the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius is outside. Okay, so things begin to go bad with Commodus, and he rules from 180 to 192 CE, right? Very end of the 2nd century. This is where things start to get bad. Now, it's not his successor, but we get a new dynasty after Commodus. It starts with a guy by the name of Septimius Severus. He's a Roman aristocrat, but he's actually from Africa, which is interesting, right? This guy's not even born in Rome. He's born in Africa, and he becomes the Roman emperor. And this is Septimius Severus right here. And he does a pretty good job overall, right? But when he dies, he makes the decision to make both of his sons, like, rule together as emperor. And if you've been paying attention in this course, you can get a sense for maybe how that ends up playing out. So what did we learn from the late Roman Republic when two people try to rule together? It doesn't work. They just want to kill each other. And that's exactly what happens here. So the two sons of Septimius Severus, one guy is named Karakala, this dude down here. His brother, yeah, exactly. His brother is named Gita, and Karakala kills his brother. And then not only does he kill his brother, but he has his people go throughout the city of Rome and erase the memory of his brother from all monuments. All right? So in the Roman Forum we're looking at over here, this is the arch, the victory arch of Septimius Severus. And you can see like Septimius over here. And actually this is Karakala, so Gita would have been over here. You can see Karakala here. This would have been Gita. And he has people go through and literally chisel off the face of his brother from ever having like been seen in public monuments. This is what we call in Rome the process of damnatio memoriae, right? That's the Latin term down here. And it's really the damnation of memory. And so he's getting rid of his brother. So you can see that things are, trending in the wrong direction here, right? Remember when I said you can be as weird as you want, but how about let's not start fighting Romans with Romans? And we can kind of start to see that coming back here. And this is happening in the early 200s, right? The early 3rd century CE. Now, despite the fact that this is happening, let's keep in mind that, things are still going pretty well overall, right? We're starting to see the cracks in the system, but, overall, Rome's still doing pretty well. One of the major monuments in Rome are known as the Baths of Karakala. These are maybe the single, largest structure from ancient Rome in the city. Just on the south side of the city, you can still visit it today. But a huge monumental bath structure built by Karakala. One of the cool things today is you can actually go see performances there. So a couple of years ago, I was there and went to see the Italian opera Tosca in the Baths of Karakala. And it is a very, very cool, very dramatic place to watch a performance. Okay, a little bit later, right? A few years later in the 3rd century, we've got Karakala has been assassinated, and we've got the rise of this guy here, Elagabalus. And Elagabalus is kind of a weird dude. He grows up in the East, eventually makes his way to Rome. He becomes emperor at a very young age, and he decides what he's going to do is change the entire religion of Rome, right? Remember how Rome, one of the successful things is that, they're very accepting of other religions? Well, now what's going to happen is Elagabalus is going to be nah, how about just my religion? And what he really likes is the god Elagabal, who in Latin is known as Sol Invictus, or the unconquered sun. And you can always see him with the kind of Statue of Liberty kind of headdress going on in the pictures down here. Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, or unconquerable sun. This is what Elagabalus is trying to make the new religion in Rome. You can see from his dates of rule, he also did not last very long. And he's launching us kind of, not just him, but really him and the successors are leading to a period of time that we call the 3rd century crisis. Okay? So the zeros and the 100s are really good in the Roman Empire, right? This is the Pax Romana, that's when Rome's flourishing. The 200s, right? The 200s or the 3rd century CE, this is where kind of shit falls apart, right? We call it the 3rd century crisis, and it's perhaps best exemplified by the greatest name in all of Roman emperors, right? It's not Augustus, it's not Marcus Aurelius, it's not Trajan. The greatest name in all of Roman emperors is this guy, Pupienus. Now, Pupienus totally exemplifies the problems in the 3rd century. And he's ruling in the year 238, which we also call the year of the 6 emperors. Anytime you have something called the year of the 6 emperors, things are not going well, right? 6 emperors in 1 year. Now, he is ruling along with this other guy, this guy Balbinus here, right? They're ruling together, and they're both very, very skeptical of each other. And one day, Balbinus is in his throne room, right? And Pupienus comes rushing in, right? And he says, there are barbarians here, and they're ready to kill us. Can you please let me have my Praetorian guard in here to protect us both from these invading barbarians here? And Balbinus is I'm not letting you have your Praetorian guard in here. You're going to use that to kill me. And Pupienus is no, we need the guards here because there are people here to kill us. And Balbinus is nope, I know what you're trying to do. And while they are arguing in the middle of whether Pupienus can have his Praetorian guard there, then the German barbarians bust in, and they do indeed kill both of the emperors. And so this is just first of all, you've got emperors getting killed rampantly, which is not a good sign for political stability. And yeah, 6 emperors in 1 year, things are bad. Okay, So for most of the 200s, right, that's just like one little snippet that gives you a sense for kind of the chaos that's going on politically. And it's not until this dude Diocletian, okay, at the end of the 3rd century, who's like, this has got to stop. We need to instate stability to the Roman world. And the way that he does this, right, his strategy for doing so is to split things up, right? Think back to, remember when Octavian and Mark Antony and kind of sort of Lepidus, right? They defeated the senatorial resistance, and then they split up the Roman Republic into 3 different areas, right? Octavian got the West, Antony got the East, Lepidus got North Africa. Kind of sort of the same thing is going on here. And so what Diocletian does is he splits this into 4 different districts. So you've got like Britain and France, you've got the West with Italy and Spain and North Africa, you've got this region here, right, kind of based on Greece, and then you've got Asia Minor over here in the East. And not only that, but he comes up with a whole new plan for how emperors are going to exist, right? So there's 4 people ruling at any given time, right? 1 in each region. And the way it works is that you've got 2 senior emperors, and he calls these guys like the Augusti, right? The Augustuses. They're like the 2 senior emperors. And then below them, you've got the 2 Caesars, okay? And then after 20 years of ruling, the Augustuses, right, the Augusti, are supposed to retire. And the Caesars become the Augusti, right? And then the new Augusti, they choose new Caesars. And so now you don't have uncertainty during times of succession, right? That you know that the Caesars will like become the Augusti will choose new Caesars, and this process is supposed to kind of continue on and on and on. But if anybody remembers, well, before we get to that, first of all, it kind of sort of works at least once. So Diocletian, after serving as like one of the Augustuses for 20 years, he retires, right? You don't get a lot of Roman emperors who retire, but Diocletian does, and he retires to this little area right here, ancient Roman Spalato, which is modern Split in modern day Croatia. And one of the super cool things, do I have a picture of this? How do I not? We gotta, hold on. We gotta find a picture of this. Let's figure this out here. So one of the super cool things is you can go still see the retirement palace in the city of Split in modern day Croatia. So let's see if we can bring this up here. Come on. All right, let's see if we can do this here. There we go. Okay, so one of the kind of super cool things here is, let me see if I can get my big head out of the way. There we go. You can still see where his palace is in like the modern city of Split. So this whole thing over here, this giant rectangle, this was Diocletian's palace. And there are parts of it, especially right in here, that are still like the original ancient Roman thing. And you can still see that. All this facade, right, these columns, this is all the original ancient Roman stuff here. And all the fortifications, the walls around the outside, that all dates to the period of Diocletian. And it actually shrinks down. The whole city shrinks down so much in the medieval period that the entire city of Split during the medieval period is living inside the walls of Diocletian's palace. So it's a super, super cool site. And as you can see, it's kind of majestically located against the sea as well. So a very, very cool site. But yeah, Diocletian actually retires, which does not happen very frequently in Roman history. So there we go. Get that out of there. There we go. Okay, now, if you remember back to what happened with Antony and Octavian and Lepidus, who also split up the Roman Republic, it didn't last, right? It doesn't take very long for people to be like, well, my little region over here, right? My little region is cool, but how much cooler would it be if I had all the regions? And what we end up getting is we get one of the Caesars who's ruling in this area up here, a guy by the name of Constantine, who decides that he would indeed like to have all the regions. And so what he ends up doing is he ends up marching his legions on the city of Rome. He ends up fighting his cousin, a guy by the name of Maxentius. And this is at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312. And this is where Constantine has this vision, right? And the night before the battle, he sees the Chi Rho. And the Chi Rho is the symbol of Christ. So it's not exactly a cross like the way we think of it in Christianity today, but it's the Greek letter Chi, right, which is an X, or it looks like an X, and then the Greek letter Rho, which looks like a capital P, and they're kind of intertwined there. And he sees this, it's the first two letters of the words Christos, right, the anointed one. What it ends up being is, well, what he ends up doing is having his whole army paint this symbol, right, the Chi Rho symbol, on their like shields and on their armor the next day before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, and right outside the city of Rome. You can still go cross the Milvian Bridge today. He defeats his cousin and he takes over the city of Rome. And so we're talking less than 50 years where this split, divided Roman Empire that Diocletian came up with worked. And all of a sudden now it's been reunited by the Emperor Constantine. Now, Constantine ends up moving his capital to the city of Constantinople. He's kind of got some delusions of grandeur himself there, right? Naming it after himself. It was the other old city of Byzantium and the modern city of Istanbul. So that's where he sets up shop with his new imperial capital, and it's moved east to Constantinople. Now later that century, we get Theodosius I, who ends up dividing the empire for good, right? So in 395, Theodosius goes back to this strategy of trying to divide the empire to make things actually work a little bit smoother. And never again, right? 395, that is the last time that Rome was ever kind of a single giant Roman Empire. It never ends up getting put back together. Which is one of the interesting things, right? That the empire is the only time where the entire Mediterranean is under a single political power. After 395, that's not the case anymore. And what ends up happening is the West, that becomes it's still based on Latin. It kind of devolves fairly quickly, especially with these barbarian invasions. In the East over here, that actually turns into what we call the Byzantine Empire, and kind of becomes a new Christianized Roman Empire that lasts for quite a long time. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about why this occurs, right? We'll use our final 10 minutes here to talk about what's driving this sort of kind of imperial decline. So we had 10 reasons why Rome was successful. Let's go through 10 why it failed. So like I talked about earlier, right? Eventually, Romans decide that they would rather just reap the benefits of the army rather than participate in it themselves. So Rome ends up contracting out to different groups, right? And you can imagine the problems that arise here, that if you're paying Germans, right, to be in the Roman army, and then you tell them to go fight Germans, it does not take very much for them to flip sides and start fighting against you, right? And it gets to the point where the Romans actually use the Latin term barbarus, right, or barbarian, to refer to soldiers. They start calling their own soldiers barbarians because so many of them are like non-Roman soldiers, right, that have been contracted out. Now, one of the big things are these barbarian migrations. And so this starts happening as a result, in large part, of Attila the Hun, right? And so the Huns are a group from kind of Central Asia, or the kind of Near East, and they start pushing westward, right? And the problem here is not necessarily just the Huns, but that the fact that when they push westward, they run into all these other groups, and they force those other groups to move. but the other groups don't have anywhere to move except into the Roman Empire. And it so happens that when this is happening, especially the western part of the Roman Empire has become weakened since the capital got moved from Rome to Constantinople. And all of a sudden, these kind of traditional barbarian tribes are finding themselves actually able to compete with these Roman armies that are made up mainly of barbarians themselves. Now, we talked about low taxes as a reason why Rome was successful. What ends up happening, one of the things that ends up happening in the 3rd century, right, that 3rd century crisis, is that the army is becoming super expensive and they need a way to pay for this thing, right? And some Roman, right around here, right around the reign of Commodus and Septimius Severus, and then especially in the middle of the 3rd century, they decide that what they're going to do is just print more money, right? They're like, the way to pay more soldiers is just print more money. And so what they're going to do is they're going to reduce the amount of the precious metals in the money, right? The amount of silver in a denarius goes way, way down, and they just print a lot more of it. And you can imagine what ends up happening as a result of that, right? The cost of everything is just going to go way up. And so now a loaf of bread is super expensive because you've reduced the amount of valuable metal in the coinage, so everything costs way more. So there's tons of inflation. One of the things that we get is we get kind of an over-reliance on slave labor. So what ends up happening when Rome's expanding, they're kind of replacing paid labor with slaves that they're taking from those conquests. And then when those kind of expansions stop, right? When the conquests stop and the influx of slave labor dries up, the whole economy, the way it all functions, is based on this free labor that they no longer have. And so we don't have, they don't have the same way of doing things that they did before. Trade networks break down, right? And so we see these trade networks kind of fragment. And the problem is that, like, once, the major trade networks break down, right? If Egypt can't send grain to Rome anymore, that messes up the whole system. And now you need to build entirely new trade networks locally around larger cities rather than have larger integrated trade networks. We've seen this already, right? We've got good old Pupienus here. We've got incredible instability. So look at the number of emperors per century here, right? This means we've got more than 30 emperors ruling. No, we've got more than 40 emperors ruling in the 200s, meaning that we've got about 2.5 years per emperor. So all kinds of political instability. We've got the military being the ones who are choosing the emperors, right? They are coming in and basically installing their own emperor, who lasts as long as that military can hold out until a new military installs their new emperor. We can see the number of violent deaths, right, in kind of Rome. And so what we can see is all the black dots on here, those are all emperors who died unnatural deaths. And we can see the little light blue spots, right? Those are emperors who died normally. There are a lot more black spots than there are blue spots there. The division of the empire, right? That ends up kind of really changing the way that things are done. And again, after 395, it's really never put back together. We get this kind of overexpansion, right? The military is becoming very, very expensive because they're having to contract out to these mercenaries. And in many ways, they just get too far abroad, right? This overexpansion, it becomes, anytime you increase the border another 100 miles out, the circumference of that you have to defend increases exponentially. And so it becomes very, very expensive to defend these kind of new boundaries at the very, very ends of the empire. We get new cultural changes. For a long time, this was a very, very popular explanation for why things fall apart, is that it's a cultural and religious sort of thing, right? Changing from pagan Rome to Christian Rome under Constantine just kind of changes the values of what it means to be Roman, and as a result, we get a decline in these kind of things that we attribute to Roman antiquity. And then finally, right, is the invasion of those barbarians. This is kind of like the catalyst. This is actually the thing that ends up kind of bringing, all those other things are contributing to it. The barbarians are what actually kind of deliver the final blow, especially in the Latin West. So let's go ahead and do attendance. Attendance for today is Poiple. Go ahead and choose Poiple or Purple or Poiple or Purple, whatever you want to do there. Go ahead and put that in, and then we will conclude with just a couple quick slides at the end here. And I'll go ahead and give you an extra 5 minutes on this so that we can make sure that everybody gets their quiz in. So Poiple for today. All right, so go ahead, get in Poiple. What we've got for the very, very end here, right, is just what the actual fall ends up looking like in the West. So 395, they split apart. We're just going to look at the West right now, right? Still centered on Rome. And here are the barbarian kind of invasions that actually end up dealing kind of a death blow. Oh, and Tobin, that is a good point. So some people have argued, right, that lead poisoning from lead pipes that bring water into the city would have caused significant health issues. And I think most scholars think that it's possible on an individual cases, but it's probably not as widespread enough that would be like necessary to actually kind of really make change on a kind of imperial level. But what we get with the barbarian invasions, so in 410, the Visigoths come in and sack the city of Rome for the first time in 800 years. So remember that story of the Gauls coming in way, way back in the early Roman Republic, and the Gallic general throws his sword onto the scales, right, and says, "Woe to the conquered," and the Romans have to pay up all this gold to get him out of there. Well, now for the first time in 800 years, right, the barbarians are back, and the Visigoths sack the city of Rome. Now they don't really want to stay, right? They want to loot the place, and they do. And the Romans kind of pay them to go away. But Rome is in bad shape now. It happens again 45 years later. So now the Vandals sack the city of Rome. And once again, they don't want to stick around. They just want to pillage the place. That's where we get our word vandalism, right? Because of what the Vandals did to Rome here. And then finally, in 476, we got the Ostrogoths sacking the city of Rome. And this time they decide, hey, why don't we stay for a little bit? And we've got Odoacer the Ostrogoth taking the throne in Rome and deposing the last Roman king, or the last Roman emperor in Rome, a guy by the name of Romulus Augustulus. Little Romulus, right? Little Augustus. He is deposed by Odoacer the Ostrogoth in 476. And that basically brings the Roman Empire to an end in the West. Now what we'll do on Wednesday is we'll start talking about the East, what's going on with the Byzantine Empire out there. We'll recap some of the reasons for this collapse, and we will pick it up again then. So 476, the Western Empire comes to a close. All right, everyone, have a wonderful, we will again tackle this on Wednesday. Have a wonderful, wonderful couple of days. I will see you back here Wednesday for the last content-based lecture, and we will bring this thing to a close. So have a great couple of days, and I will see you then. Bye, everyone.